Okay, hello, this is Chloe Blingett, and I will be comparing the best sellers between One Piece set OP11 or Fist of Divine Speed and Pokemon sets Black Bolt and White Flare. So the way that this is going to work is I'm going to compare the top 5 best sellers within each set to each other. When choosing the top 5 for each set, I paid most of my attention to sales volume, market price, and market price changes, so very similar to how I choose my top 10 instead of going. So if you watch the other slides, you get a better idea. But essentially, I figured out my top 5 by sorting the top 10 cards that appeared within the set on TCG Player when sorted by best selling. So from the ones collected, I ranked them all based on price point, price change, and sales volume individually, and I then calculated the final ranking using a point system based on their placements in each individual category to get my top 10, in which the amount of points the final score would be the total amount of points they got from the ranking in price point plus the total amount of points they got from their ranking in price change multiplied by 2 plus the total amount of points they got from their ranking in sales volume multiplied by 4. So just a visual representation of that. This is OP11, I believe. Yeah. So these are all the cards these are the 18 cards I collected from TCG Player when I sorted it by best selling within the set. And then from there, I collected the price point from TCG Player and from Price Charting, and I averaged those out since these two websites are pretty popular for price tracking within the community as far as I've seen. And then I also kept score. I also collected the price change data, which is just what percentage the price has changed within the past 3 months for each individual card. You'll see I have some NAs around here. That's just if the price wasn't given to me or I just couldn't find data for it. In this case, the graphs just weren't available when I was collecting the data. And then from here, I would rank them. So I would rank them based off, let's say, average price, like this. And then based off of their placement, I would give them a certain amount of points. In this case, first place would get 18 points. And last place would get 1 point or the least amount of points. This one's a little difficult because we have so many missing values. Do the same for price change, give them points based off their placements, and then I'd personally rank the sales volume just from looking at their prices on TCG Player, and then also looking at the recently solds on eBay. I'd calculate their points. I'd put all their points here, go into my calculator, which has the equation that I just talked about. And then from here, I would rank them based off of the amount of points they had. I'd take the top 10 and put them in there. And the same thing with Pokemon, obviously. From here on out, like I said, I will be comparing the cards based on their rankings. So in this case, the number 1 best-selling card in OP11 will be compared to the number 1 best-selling card in Black Bolt and White Flare, and so on. And each slide will have both cards present, as well as the explanation of why I think both cards are in their ranking within their respective set. And then I'll comment on it from there. I'm just talking about similarities and maybe some differences between the two. And I'm going to add in a few important notes. Black Bolt and White Flare are technically 2 different sets, but they have so much overlap that I'm considering them one set. So that's something to think about. That's something to think about mainly because they're 2 different sets, there are different mascot cards. But that's just something to know, and that's something we'll get into later. Thing number 2, I know quite a bit about Pokemon. I don't know that much about One Piece, so if I say anything inaccurate, I apologize. But everything I got from One Piece I did based off of researching into the community and the Reddit and stuff like that. Okay, getting into our number 1 ranks. We have Lucky Roo TR, which is a treasure card from the One Piece set, and Zekrom EX 172 from Pokemon. Also, I color-coded the cards, so anything in like blue or with a blue border like this is related to the One Piece card. Anything in orange or in orange like this is related to the Pokemon cards. So starting off with a factor that's seen in both, we'll talk about the character. In Lucky Roo, I think that's how you say their name, I apologize if it's not, but Lucky Roo is tied to Red Hair Pirates, which leads to it benefiting from long-term fan hype. This is related to the media, the anime, the manga, so this character is popular due to its presence within the media. Zekrom, on the other hand, similar reason. Zekrom's a legendary Pokemon. It's also the Gen 5 mascot. Because it's heavily associated with the Pokemon Black video game and generation, it adds a nostalgia factor to it, which appeals to especially older collectors. So both of their characters are heavily related to the media, which adds to their popularity. One of the differences, though, in Zekrom is that this card and Zekrom in general has been the advertised chase card of Black Bolt, which just makes it highly sought after in general. So essentially Pokemon was like, hey, we're releasing this set, you're gonna want this card, And so that automatically increases popularity. That also just by default makes it rarer. And then talking even more about rarity, Pokemon, all of the cards you're about to see are going to be full art cards for Pokemon cards, which are just essentially cards that are just all art, if that makes sense. As you can see, there isn't like really any board or anything cutting off here. It's kind of hard to explain because for One Piece, like if you said full art for One Piece, technically all cards are full art, so it's kind of hard to apply to that, but it's just a rarity. Full art cards are what collectors go after. They're the rarer cards. They're the ones you chase after, essentially. And I would say treasure rare is actually a pretty good equivalent that they get to that. Treasure rares are among the rarest pulls in a set, similar to how full arts are among the rarest pulls in a set. And so rarity is also a factor for both of these cards in terms of them being up here. Similar to how advertisement isn't a factor within Lucky Roo, a factor that isn't there for Zekrom is the playability. So within the One Piece, so in general, the One Piece TCG collectors and buyers, sorry, I'm trying to phrase this correctly. One Piece TCG is a lot more targeted to players as opposed to collectors. So because of that, and because people like actually know how to play the game, and buyers, there's a percentage of buyers that are just players and are buying cards just to use in their decks to play in the game. Playability tends to be a large factor when looking at the best sellers of a set. Pokemon does not have that. Pokemon right now is targeted a lot more to collectors, which is why the chase cards tend to be full arts, and why maybe you'll see a little bit more emphasis on like aesthetic, or like you'll see quite a few differences in artwork between the two sets. But because the Pokemon TCG is more targeted towards collectors, you won't see playability as a factor. Maybe you'll see it a couple times in relation to VGC instead, which contributes a bit more towards character popularity than anything. But One Piece cards will have playability as much more of a weighted factor. In this case, this Lucky Roo card has strong in-game utility, which contributes to red decks, which are currently extremely popular within the game meta. And that's another reason why it's up there that Zekrom just doesn't have. And I think that's it for these two cards. We can move on to the second place cards, which are Luffy Toru, I'm sorry, I don't know how to say it, a Luffy card SP, and Kyurem EX165. So we talk about characters again. Character popularity is present here. In this case, Kyurem is another legendary Pokemon, in this case with multiple forms, so it makes it popular among fans who like strong lore appeal. Also talk about the media. This Pokemon is very lore relevant in case of the legendary Pokemons. Well, technically this is a legendary Pokemon, but the mascot Pokemon of this generation, which is Reshiram and Zekrom. We just looked at Zekrom. We're probably going to look at Reshiram later. This Pokemon is up here due to its popularity among fans in relation to the media, similar to how Luffy is also up here in relation to the media. Luffy is just one of the most popular One Piece characters. This version of Luffy specifically is connected to the Wano arc within the manga and anime, which is one of the most beloved arcs in the series. So similar to how Kyurem is very connected to the mascots of Gen 5 and the narrative of franchise, Luffy is just very connected to the anime, and this specific version of Luffy is very driven. Its popularity is very driven by its relevance to the anime. Rarity, once again, we got a full art card here, so it's always going to be up here. This is an SP card, which is a special rare card. Similar to treasure rare cards, SP cards appeal strongly to collectors. They both have nice artwork, but artwork is a little bit more weight in this one than it is this one, as far as I've seen. This artwork is appealing, and it has cinematic framing and more details, which makes it very appealing to collectors and fans of Luffy. In this case, as to why this one is up here, because you'll notice we've only gone over one mascot so far, and the next mascot's actually this one, but it's below it in ranking. This is a legendary Pokemon, and also a Pokemon that's super attached to the mascots. It isn't as popular as the mascots, and it also isn't one of the advertised chase cards, and so it is often cheaper than the other mascot cards, while still being connected to them. So people will buy this just because it's at a cheaper price point than the mascot cards. Sorry. Third ranking, another Luffy card, Monkey D. Luffy. This is an alternate art this time, and then we have our other mascot card, Reshiram EX173. So we can go into character first. Character popularity. Luffy is one of the most popular characters in One Piece, as we've talked about before. Specifically, this is a Luffy leader card, and Luffy leader cards are always popular. Leader cards in general are quite popular, and we'll go a little bit into why later on, mainly to do with playability. Essentially, this is a really good Luffy card. Once again, we have, and then for Reshiram, this is our other Gen 5 mascot, another legendary Pokemon, and in this case, this is the advertised chase card of White Flare, which makes it as sought after as Zekrom, or it should, but it's lower in ranking. We also have that nostalgia factor from just it being in Gen 5 that Zekrom had, and we also have the monochrome aesthetic, which appeals to collectors, and that Pokemon really pushes out there. And another full art. This is also a full art, but I think the main reason why it's up here is the advertised chase card. As opposed to this is an alternate art, which we talked about comparing rarity before, where like full art is pretty comparable to treasure rares and special rares. I don't think it's as comparable to alt arts, but it's still something to know. Alt arts are also sought by collectors, maybe not as heavily, but it still is. And alt art leaders are often desired due to the art style usually being cleaner with stronger contrast and more personality. And then we also see the playability factor that isn't present for the Pokemon cards so far. In this case, this card has a competitive presence as a leader card. Leader cards are just very important in competitive play, and this is also Luffy leader card, which just also ups the popularity among leader cards quite a bit. Our ranking number 4, we have another Luffy card, surprise. This one's another alternate art, and then we have Seismitoad. Let's talk about Seismitoad really quickly, because this was a card that I'm still a little bit confused about, but he's within our top 5. This one I added the factor of playability because it's a little bit difficult for me to see the other factors within it, but playability also talks about character popularity a bit because I talk about competitive relevance both within the video game and the card game. So when I say video game, I'm talking about VGC, which are the video game competitions of Pokemon, which is like, you can collect cards and people don't play the card game, but people are invested in VGC, which is the video game portion. So if you've ever played a Pokemon video game, the turn-based battle system that they have there, they just turned that into competitive play. And so apparently Seismitoad was quite relevant in VGC for a bit. And so that kind of, it increases more its character popularity than its playability if we're looking at a card. Since we're talking about playability, let's look at Luffy really quickly. This Luffy is considered a power peak Luffy, which fans love and can be strong in gameplay. I'm gonna be so honest. There are fans that refer to power peak Luffy both in terms of the card game and the anime, and there are some that refer to him as power peak Luffy only from the anime. So this might also just have the same character popularity. But there are fans that are saying that it's also strong in gameplay, so I added this in. And the character popularity, I didn't talk about I didn't add the character popularity factor with Seismitoad because I don't actually think Seismitoad is that popular of a Pokemon. But we talked about Luffy being one of the most popular characters in One Piece before. And artwork, in this case, I think art style does carry this one a little heavier just because I don't see as much of the other factors. This art style is very unique. It is liked by many fans, and it was also done by a quite popular artist among the collectors of Pokemon cards. In a similar way, this is a very appealing art style to fans. It's an alternate art as well. In this case, it has high contrast, high detail, and dynamic posing. In terms of differences, they're very different art styles. We can talk about that. Very different color palettes. That's the color I was looking for. But I think they're both very appealing to fans who know the Pokemon and know the character. In this case, not only is it unique, but it's very bright and vibrant, and there's quite a bit of character expression in here. This is a lot of character expression with the dynamic posing, the high contrast, the action shot. And yeah, I think that's it for rank 4, which means we're on to our last one. It's rank 5. Sanji SP, a special rare card, and Hilda 164. This is our first trainer card, full art trainer card at that. But in terms of trainer cards within the Pokemon TCG, trainer cards attract collector speculation, so they tend to be up there. And specifically, we have something called the full art trainer effect, which I didn't name, but I've seen people talk about, which is just a thing within Pokemon collectors where, for some reason, human character full art trainers tend to become bestsellers, and so Hilda is up here. We can talk about character popularity. Hilda is, I don't think she appears in the anime at all. She is the Gen 5 female protagonist in the video game, which makes it appealing to video game players. So what that means for those who've never played a Pokemon video game, you get the choice between being a boy and a girl, and if you choose girl, then you are Hilda. You are this character. Usually you don't have the name, but you look like her. You are essentially that character. That makes this card appealing to video game players who maybe played as her. Moving on to Sanji. Sanji also has that character popularity, less from the video game. They don't have a video game, but related to the anime, Sanji is one of the original 5 within the Straw Hat Crew, and so that boosts his popularity just by default. Rarity. This is a special rare card. We talked about that before, drawing attention from collectors. Similar to how this is a trainer card and a full art trainer card, which draws attention from collectors. This one also we talk about artwork. Foil finishes and detailed art style with unique background draws attention of collectors. This one has a little bit less of an artwork factor or trait. And collectability. So this isn't something that's unique to only One Piece sets, it just happens to be unique in this comparison. I think we'll probably see collectability later on in other Pokemon sets. But in this case, you'll notice that this card is quite similar to this card and that they're also both special rare cards. So this card matches with and is associated with other special rare cards within this set having the same art style and similar backgrounds, and so collectors will buy this card just so that they can have special rare cards, if that makes sense. So this card being popular and other special rare cards being popular boosts the popularity of this one. I think that's it for the rankings. Just going over a few of them, or just going over some of them, some of the traits. Playability as a factor in One Piece cards, One Piece bestsellers being up there, as opposed to the Pokemon cards not really having playability as a factor, like at all, except for maybe Seismitoad. The push from Pokemon really affecting the bestsellers as opposed to, I think, for One Piece. One Piece, I didn't really look into what they advertise as their bestsellers, but I want to say Lucky Roo is not an advertised bestseller, is not one of the push chase cards like Zekrom and Reshiram were, and yet it's our number one. And so I think the advertisement and also just the advertised pushed rarity really contributes to Pokemon bestsellers. And then character popularity is a factor for both of them. It's a little iffy because character popularity for Pokemon apply to Pokemon less than it does trainers. You know, Pokemon for Pokemon cards are characters for One Piece. But there's still media relevance, it seems, within our bestsellers, specifically with Hilda, Reshiram, Kyurem, Zekrom, and Reshiram being legendary Pokemon, and Luffy and Sanji being our Straw Hat crew members. And yeah, I think that's it. Thank you.